Would you bring up the next video, and I'll narrate just a little bit until I get tired of looking at it. So in this area to take place, we'll begin actually pouring concrete on that field tray, which is slightly larger than the actual football field, later on this week. And you can see that an enormous series of super trusses beneath which the field tray will ultimately roll into. As you look through the open oculus of the roof, you can see the cable net system, which is partly erected. Fortunately, it is high enough that we can do work beneath it. And you know what? I think we'll just pause it there. And I'll go into what everyone has been so interested in waiting to hear. Because Allegiant Stadium is an enormous high-profile project with unprecedented public scrutiny, any construction hiccup becomes exaggerated throughout the social media and the press. The unfortunate newspaper headlines earlier this week, based upon an excerpt from the report by the Stadium Authority's construction representative, is an example. So this morning this afternoon, I'd like to touch on a handful of topics. What happened, what's being done, the impact on the budget, the impact on the schedule, and then I'd like to make some comments about the Grand Canyon report. So first of all, what happened? During the ordinary course of building anything, not everything always falls into place as smoothly as planned. This would be true whether you're building a doghouse or whether you're building a luxury hotel. And it's the case in building a huge stadium with a project schedule containing more than 43,000 individual tasks as well. One such event happened recently during the installation of the stainless steel cable net system, which will ultimately support this ETFE roof. As the stainless steel cabling grid was being hoisted into place and attached to the circumferential compression ring formed by the steel canopy roof, one of the connections was overstressed and resulted in a handful of bolts holding one of the more than 100 joints in the lower portion of that canopy to break. Bear in mind that we are talking about literally a handful of bolts in a structure which has more than 500,000 similar bolts. No one was injured, and the structure was never in jeopardy of failure. What's being done? The bolts were analyzed by Wiss, Janney, Elsner Associates, a metallurgical testing lab, to determine if there were manufacturing defects or flaws in the materials. The lab determined that the bolts were completely as specified, not defective in any way. A team of 5 structural engineering firms, Arup, Thornton Tomasetti, Geiger Engineers, Simpson Gumpertz, and Bollinger Goldman, modeled the conditions and developed sophisticated computer simulations of what happened in order to identify the precise causes and confirm that there were no underlying design defects. There are none. The same team of engineers then developed a very detailed revised installation sequence and methodology, as well as a testing and measurement protocol to ensure that the forces similar to the ones which contributed to the breakage would not be repeated. This revised installation procedure was reviewed extensively with Clark County building officials prior to the resumption of the cable installation. Any one of the 5 engineering firms, as well as Clark County building officials, had the ability to veto any aspect of the revised plan. And it was only after the completion of this exhaustive, time-consuming process that work on the cable net resumed last week. It's worthwhile to note that the forces imposed on the compression ring by the cables are at their very maximum during the installation process, and that these forces significantly decrease once the system is fully in place. For instance, the force on an individual cable during the installation is approximately 850,000 pounds, but this force decreases by more than 75% once that cable net is finally in place. As expected, the broken bolts in the damaged connection were replaced, but additionally, even though the nearly 1,700 bolts making up the other 105 similar connections were determined to be undamaged, in an abundance of caution, Mortenson McCarthy chose to systematically remove and replace all of the remaining connection bolts as well. This was not required by the engineers, nor was it a requirement of the county. It was simply another example of the thoroughness and commitment to quality and safety that is one of the key reasons we selected Mortenson to lead the construction. These people are problem solvers. The budget impact. Mortenson McCarthy and their subcontractors own all of the costs impacts associated with the installation of the cable net and ETFE roof. This would include any costs arising out of the incidental damages to the building, such as rain, or any of the costs associated with resequencing or accelerating the schedule in order to meet the completion date. Neither StadCo nor especially the Stadium Authority have any liability for costs arising out of the cable net delay. What's the schedule impact? Mortenson McCarthy has already begun implementing a recovery schedule for the roof completion, which includes using 3 cranes instead of 1 to remove the cable net hoisting equipment from the canopy roof, recovering 25 days during the ETFE installation alone by using multiple installation crews and installing safety netting beneath the entire 7-acre oculus, rather than just about 1/8 of that area as originally planned. Using 2 cranes for the ETFE framing installation rather than a single crane as originally planned, and installing the ETFE material on a 6-day per week schedule rather than a 5-day per week schedule as originally planned. As a result, the cable netting installation was delayed, which was delayed by approximately 60 days. Date by which the building will be fully enclosed and weathertight will have only been delayed by about 30 days. Mid-May instead of mid-April. Now, the Grand Canyon report, it correctly notes at least 8 separate times that the completion of the construction will be on time. And Tony has reiterated that multiple times here this morning. Secondly, it correctly observes that many mission-critical items, such as mechanical equipment and food service equipment, are ahead of schedule. And then finally, it conjectures that the completion date may be in jeopardy if rain causes damage to interior finishes. It's not that this conjecture is incorrect so much as it is irrelevant. I'll tell you why. The idea that rain will cause substantial schedule jeopardizing damage is belied by the actual experience in December, which, according to the National Weather Service, saw 200% of the normal December rainfall. Yet the total damage sustained prior to the current protective measures, which have been put in place, was less than $100,000 and resulted in no scheduled delay. So even the rainiest month of the year, with twice the normal rainfall, was hardly a showstopper. And according to this same National Weather Service, the average rainfall during the additional month in which the ETFE roof remains open varies from between 12% and 16% of the rainfall that was actually experienced in December. So if December's double the normal rainfall had virtually no impact on the completion schedule, then surely a month with a small fraction of that rainfall will not be a showstopper either. And bear in mind that in December, less than 60% of the exterior glass wall was in place, whereas it will be fully in place in March. With the exterior wall in place and the steel canopy roof, which covers the concourses, suites, concessions, the highly finished areas are protected against the rain. The remaining portion of the roof open to the rain, the ETFE area, resides above the concrete field level floor and portions of the concrete seating bowl treads. Rain falling upon the field level concrete floor or concrete seating treads, which are sealed and caulked precisely so that they will shed water when the building is washed down, is hardly a showstopper, especially when the normal rainfall amounts to less than 1/4 of an inch during that entire month. Mortenson has extensive experience in constructing major sports and entertainment facilities. U.S. Bank Stadium, where the Vikings call home, SunTrust Park, home of the Atlanta Braves, Target Field, Coors Field, TCF Bank Stadium, Chase Center, FedEx Forum, and many other stadiums which have been successfully completed on time by them. Mortenson has never failed to complete a sports facility on time. Allegiant Stadium will not be their first failure because Allegiant Stadium will be completed on time. I'm happy to take your questions.
They don't ask any.
Questions for Mr. Webb?
Seriously? Board's lame.
Great.
Fine job.
I will turn it over to Mr. Bedane, who will correct any of my errors and talk about another important subject.
Thanks, Mr. Webb. Welcome, Mr. Boudin.
For the record, Mark Boudin. Who wants to talk parking? Right? Thanks, Don.